All right, it is now 7:36. And I am calling to order the meeting of the June meeting of the Law Rules and Ethics Committee. 7:35. And first item is to identify and welcome the members of the committee. That includes the screen sharing. Okay. Stop. Okay, I have to go back, figure this out. All right, so we have Steve Fruit, Vice Chair, and Sylvia Alexander, member of the committee. 3 out of 4, we have a quorum. I have not heard from Chuck. So if he comes in, love to have him. And we got the wrong address, right?
Oh, I was just looking for it.
Sorry,
Sorry.
whoever's out there, sorry. Oh, nobody's out there. Come on.
Wife enters from stage left.
Okay, I just want to go on it, that's good.
Newsletter.
That's it. Go sit up. Stay there. Yeah. Sit up.
Recording in progress.
Close the door, please, Lawrence. Say slam it. Close. All right, so we're now ready to begin. Again, sorry about that. And as some pause, how do I unpause this? That's what I wanted to do. So when I see share? Oh, right in the middle of share. Is that what I want? That's what I want.
Wow.
Okay, so now we're sharing. That's the agenda.
Good job.
And we get to it, I think it's a quite meaty agenda. Our next meeting, by the way, is not next month, but September 8th. All things considered, okay, so approval of the minutes. Any comments on the minutes?
Not for me, I reviewed them, but when you first circulated them.
Okay, moving right along. Chair's report. No, that's still the old
Those
minutes.
the minutes.
Okay. This is something that Julie asked me to take up. There is. We're talking about an extremely small sample. This and the second item, extremely small sample. Only the chair of the board, and I guess employees of the board, have access to NewYorkCity.gov email addresses. The question she's raising is whether or not there ought to be something official about when someone leaves a position that they're told in writing that they must abandon, get rid of, I use the word retire, use of that .gov email address. My immediate reaction was, who are we talking about? Altogether, maybe there were 3 or 4 chairpersons who had access to it. And each of them in turn, and I think she said that Laura never took on. Oh, I think she did, but never mind. But nobody's using it, so I don't know why it's an issue that we have to be bureaucratic about and create a bylaw, create something in the, what do you call it, in the, ethical guidance manual, which says upon leaving office, the chair has to surrender their .gov email address. Strikes these more as administrative. As a person leaves, the district manager notifies whomever, changes from A to B, and it's done. So is there a reaction other than mine that anyone feels strongly about?
I don't think I understand. Is it literally this?
You don't either.
Is it literally this email address that the single address in the world
No, it's John Doe at cbnyc.gov.
at CB
But
dot?
why would anybody really want it after they leave?
I
And
don't
it's,
know, sentimental value. I
and
have
it's
no
not
idea.
taking up a spot. That's why I was asking. It's not occupying a unique address that no one else can use.
No,
'cause
it's
the
only to
board
that
chair-
person.
We'll get a new address,
Right,
yes. So I
But he
found,
doesn't want the person to be able to see what we're doing?
well, you can't see anything. It's just your address.
no, she doesn't want someone to take the address as a legacy. It's theirs, they keep it.
I see.
And to me, it strikes me as overkill to create something in writing, A, for so small a population that we need to worry about, and B, it's administrative. Notify whomever, this is no longer necessary.
I agree that it's administrative, and I also think, although this is where my own knowledge of this stuff is limited. If there were an issue with people continuing to use Laura Spalter at cb.nyc.gov,
I,
just deactivate it. And I don't mean just you or me, but do it, or whatever they're called now. You know, what I mean, that's not,
maybe
it's not our thing.
because, of, Rosemary getting involved with this bylaw thing.
Well, that's years ago.
Because
Was that 5, 6 years ago?
wanted to be left on the, mailing, list.
Or being on the mailing list isn't the same as cb.gov.
Cause anybody in the
That's
community
true.
can be on the mailing list.
Yeah, so
Mhm.
I don't see what the problem is.
Yeah,
Neither do I. I shall reaffirm that with
okay.
Julie. The second one is similar but different. A board member, unnamed, who did not reapply, who did not apply for reappointment. Therefore, at the point of point of May 1st, that person was no longer a board member.
March 1st.
May 1st.
Really? Okay.
And that person wrote a letter to a commissioner on a CB issue
Oh,
in which that person signed herself as,
being on the board.
we'll go that far, being on the board. As if that added more weight to whatever the comments were. This is certainly an ethical violation.
Yes,
Person is no longer on the board and shouldn't present herself as being on the board. So the question is, and Julie's raising it again, whether there should be a bureaucratic solution that add to ethical guidance manual, once you leave, you cannot use your
You can't use
identification
that.
as a board member or ethical guidance or bylaws. Again, I think this is bureaucratic overkill.
That's like saying, it's like putting in the bylaws, thou shalt not kill. You don't
Yeah,
need the bylaws for that. You,
No.
when you can't misrepresent yourself, but any more than I could represent myself as an assistant US attorney that I stopped
Right.
being in 1996. There's no
Right.
rule about that because it's just not right. I don't know, you cite the 10 Commandments.
right, she's not.
Well, that person was notified, whoops, don't do this again.
That's what happened in this instance.
Yes,
Yeah, and I
And
wouldn't
to my
say,
knowledge,
I
that
wouldn't say
person-
it's an error in judgment. I would say it's an error.
Well, I think that, really, chutzpah to do that.
Right.
yes, so the
Now,
question
maybe they
is,
didn't pay attention to the calendar, you know what I mean, if it was
Yeah.
right.
so do
Even
we-
now, when you're a member of the board, you don't, put it down as the chair of the board.
or anything.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm just saying unless you're doing board business, you can't put it after your name. You can say in the letter, by the way, I'm a
Mhm.
member of Bronx Community Board 8. I'm not a fly-by-night. I'm not nobody. I mean,
Right.
I've shown a commitment to my community, but
Yeah.
you're not writing in your
No.
official capacity.
that shouldn't be done.
15, 20 years ago, there was a community member of a committee who began going to governmental meetings, agency meetings, and identifying him herself as community board member and spoke with the authority, I'm of the community board 8, therefore, when the person was only a community member, not a board member. And that person was called to task, and that person shows up occasionally at board meetings as a Zoom member, but I don't remember a bureaucratic solution to that problem. The person was told, do not do it again, and that was the end of it. I tend to agree with Julie that this is an important issue. I don't think it requires a bureaucratic solution. And I say that from all the years as an employee of the Board of Ed. When John Doe makes something you don't like, the principal sends out a memorandum. No one's allowed to do that. Well, only one guy did it. So I hate bureaucratic solutions.
If it was something that was something that was confusing people and it was repeatedly happening, that would be one thing. But I think the far more questionable and challenging thing that I think we may already have something in our rules about is when you're a member of the board, you can't, it's COIB.
Right,
really.
you can't represent
yeah.
yourself as
Yeah,
being.
other than
an
on
authority.
official business,
Yeah.
other than when you're doing official business.
So those are my first two items. The third item, and I think I wrote to you with a larger paragraph, which was I wrote to our two state elected officials with a request for assistance. And please advise me on the committee on what changes are in place. Steve and I could not follow last year's assembly and senate numbers into this year because apparently if it's carried over, it gets a different number. So I didn't know how to follow it. So the responses didn't come back until a little Dunning, and I received actually a person who's not our representative. I had that person contacted also, office contacted, and within a day I had a response to that one, which we'll talk about. And Friday and today I received responses from our people. So what I did is I decided to find out if IA actually works. And so I asked IA, does it know of any changes in the open meetings law? And I got a connection to this public interest thing, which we'll talk about. And I think this first sentence also. But I want to make a point, which is troubling me greatly. If you'll recall, when Julie did her absolute best, which was best, in trying to get us in line to be able to use telecommunications, there was a rush to get us in, and the law said within 6 months, you have to get it approved now, because in 6 months it goes into effect, and if you don't get it now, you won't have it. So we wrote a resolution and had a public hearing, which gave us leeway, if possible, if whatever. And then we had the battle, and Steve and I were on other sides of that battle at the beginning. And that was where the whole concept of where and how you establish the concept for us of extraordinary circumstances. At any rate, it appears to me as we go through all this stuff that we were among the few, well, I can't put a number on it, it is not universal that all community boards are doing anything. Some are doing more, some are doing nothing.
Mhm.
And so what I'm reading in all these changes, suggested changes to the open meetings law, is to make it easier for those who aren't doing it. So when I look at some of this, I'm saying, why they worried about it? And B, we already do that. And the solutions don't help us because we're already doing that. So, this first thing, which I got out of Assembly Bill 2025, and that's very interesting because everything we read now becomes moot in 2 weeks when the session is over. And so if anyone wants to resubmit, that was our issue. If they resubmit, it gets a new number. So next year, I have to play this game again. What's happening, who submitted, who didn't submit. So we have to maintain our records for at least 5 years. I'm sure the board office knows that, but I will share it. Then you may know this group, New York Lawyers of Public Interest, put out a letter of support of a number of items, number of bills. And I will go over these. I sent this to you. I'll go over these. And it's gonna look like, what's the big deal? We're doing it already. What's the change?
Right,
So updates open meetings law to require hybrid participation of public meetings and close loopholes. I love the loophole things, which we'll get back to.
By the way, sorry for just a real quick point of information. The material that was sent by the aides to the legislators, that was ultimately, pretty helpful,
Yeah, you didn't get the last one.
okay.
You didn't get the one from Senator Garcia?
Well, the last thing that came in, I thought was from Senator,
Holy whatever.
oh no, Brad Hollyman, yes, but also from our, Senator Rivera. Gustavo
That came
Rivera.
in this morning.
Right, I got that.
I sent it out. You must put a copy on it. Okay. But I didn't
But
see.
my only question is, I didn't see that one.
I thought I sent that out.
Scrolling up, I didn't see the New York Lawyers for the Public Interest memo or anything like that, but maybe I missed.
Sure, well, if I didn't, I'm sorry. I thought I did. COVID-19, this explains why there's changes. Thank you very much. And so some of the changes they want, the bill closes bill reduces the burden of non-elected bodies by community boards requiring only the presiding officer must attend in person. And that's interesting. So that means so long as we have a public venue like this, if I show up and the rest of you are on Zoom, that's good enough. I don't know whether you like that or not, but that's something that's being pushed. Closing the loopholes, discretion regarding removing to the extent practicable. They want to remove extent practicable. And I find that interesting because what I've been doing may be in violation of this concept. And that is I send out to the public our agenda. And then I send out what I call the extended agenda, where I include materials, which I probably would hand out at a meeting. I just find it easier if I put it on the screen and have it here. But since I'm not sharing these with the public other than through screen share, maybe I'm in violation by
No.
not.
No, I think that to the extent practicable has to do with, we've always interpreted it as applying to the deadline. That's not always possible, consistent with good order and functioning of the board and committees, that to always meet that. But in terms of the level of detail, the goal is not to cover all the grounds that you're gonna cover at the meeting. That's why people are supposed to attend the
Right.
meeting. It's to give them notice that the Department of Transportation is gonna rework this intersection, and if you're interested in that intersection, show up. Not, here are the 17 things that are gonna get done. So I don't think your expanded agenda.
But later on, you'll see the concept where they want us to share all documents that may be discussed. So,
I could see that depending on the situation.
key, enable closed captioning. I know it exists. If you've been on Zoom, there's a button, turn on closed captioning.
Yeah.
I think you have to be approved by the host to be able to turn it on in the first place. And once it's on, anyone can look at it. Or B, if we have to pay extra to have that facility available. I have to ask, I don't know. I find having only the chair present to be interesting. Members may participate remotely for the circumstances provided by law, including, well, this is extraordinary circumstances. Minutes, which say, we already do this. I don't know, I thought we were required. Now to change the law to make doing what was already required, I don't get. Public bodies must provide the opportunity for members of the public to view meetings via video and real-time closed captioning or participate in real time. Again, except for closed captioning, we're doing that. Again, keep in mind, the impression I have is that other people aren't meeting minimum standards. So, and we far exceed. In public, showing form public use of video conferencing, how we do that. Maintain a page on an official government internet website, I guess, I presume.
Yeah.
What we are as
Yes.
Community Board 8 is official.
It is, it's
government.
the template, yeah.
We already do that, amend subdivision E and F. Or to remove the following loopholes to the extent practicable. Language regarding the requirement that records that are the subject of discussion at public meetings be posted 24 hours prior to the meeting. Which is why I'm saying some of the documents that I'm sharing here may be required to have been shared elsewhere. Now, practicable, if I didn't get stuff till Friday, I don't count Saturday and Sunday. Monday, I didn't have 24 hours. And if I got it this morning, I didn't get 24 hours. So take that for what it's worth. And if you didn't get this, I will send it out again. And that American Sign Language interpreters be provided upon request. To my knowledge, we have not had such a request. Do I know that we have facility to do that?
You're right. Where is this going to go?
Well,
All
this
of
is,
this?
this is recommendation from the lawyers organization.
New York Lawyers for the Public Interest is recommending what is basically distilling new proposed legislation and saying,
Uh-huh.
we think these are good changes to make.
Oh, I see.
So it's
Did
commentary.
you have to listen to them?
No, it's just it's like any citizen.
It's a recommendation to the
They're
legislature.
a good government group. They're normally, in the interest of good government, but we may not agree with everything. But
Right,
In
exactly.
this instance, we've discussed it, and I think, I feel like the participation of members is attenuated when they are just on Zoom. It's hard to hear. And they're just
No,
not as
it's
plugged in.
difficult.
And even though the technology is a miracle for any of us who lived before this
Right,
technology,
right.
it's still not perfect.
Right,
And
it's because of the facilities that we go
we go to
in,
different places.
because we're taking this and we're going there, and they're not equipped.
Right. And even our equipment isn't perfect.
Right,
So the idea that when you pass a law, I mean, sorry, Marty, I interrupted you, were going through all
Go
these
ahead.
things, but that for me, the whole notion of jettisoning if a quorum is whoever is showing up online,
right,
then if you imagine our board of 40 some odd people, and soon a quorum would be a smattering of people in
Mhm.
person. I mean, it depends. If you think those people are in person or, you trust them, you think they have the best interests of the board at heart and the community, et cetera. Maybe it's a supercharged community board, but you really aren't gonna get the people online fully plugged in. They're at home, they're family, there's other stuff
yeah,
going on.
right,
And you can't hear as well. You
Yeah.
certainly can't participate as well. So I think going down to
Well, I
basically
think-
one person, which is what,
I think the more we get into, devices, the worse it's gonna get.
Or IA, have the meeting without you, be honest. Office of Information Technology, which I presume is a state office. To a low-cost platform responsive web-based, they're supposed to help us get this started. I'm not aware that the state helped us at all. I'm presuming the city helped us. Which I know it's communication, and they follow up. So. Now, this is interesting, because it reminded me of something else. Amend the public office law to allow members, any other person authorized to attend an executive session is allowed to attend via video conferencing, and the presumption here is what we do. We've allowed people to attend our executive sessions,
because you can drop people online.
yes. But I do not believe we allow a vote for people attending via Zoom. They can participate, but they can't vote unless they're under ADA of some form or
Right, well,
another.
that just says attend.
What?
No, I mean, that just says
Oh,
attend
attend.
the executive session.
Okay, well, we
We certainly do
attend.
that,
we allow them to participate
right?
as we have. But this raised another idea in my mind. There has been a number of times, and I'll indicate FAR as being one of them, when we've had executive sessions and Farah was invited in, and there were some members who bristled at the idea that she be allowed in. Just to include any other persons authorized, which is always the case. If the body decides Farah knows more about possible rentals and having her input is important to the conversation. So maybe the error is when the chair says, hello, Farah. It may be a requirement that we say, is it okay if I bring Farah in? And then there's a vote, but not having, the one example I gave, not having her here would be a great injustice to our conversation.
Mhm.
But the fact is, there's nothing preventing a non-executive committee member from attending an executive committee meeting, executive session, if they're invited.
Right, I don't, it's like so many things, I don't see it as a problem. Because assuming people are not asleep at the switch, the board chair knows that if it's something about Farah's or Artie's salary, it's best if the staff
That
is not
different.
participating. And that's just a judgment, it's a common sense call. You can't provide for everything, you have to rely on people's common sense. And if a member sees that during such a discussion, the staff member is still up on the screen or in person, if the other people are in person, then you just bring it to the attention of the chair as a point of order. It's not rocket science.
So, agreed. And this one I think difficult, the way we operate. We have people who sign in. Unless someone is watching, we have the foggiest idea who signed out. I mean, one of the reasons for having someone's face shown is, they're still there. But obviously, if you have to go out for a personal call, let's leave that whole category wide open, then that doesn't count. But if you've left the meeting, A, we don't know if we still have a quorum, and B, we don't know if you're there. You're marked in attendance, but for the important votes, you weren't there. And if we say unanimous, we assume that you were one of the voters.
But we don't, vote in the executive session.
No, this is beyond it. Is this still about the executive session?
No.
No, we're just general
Oh,
now.
oh.
But
General.
look, again, it's just a practical thing. We're a community board. We take the role of a respectable amount of time after the beginning of the meeting to assume that this is the point at which we would be capturing the most attendees. And it's true that an hour later,
Yeah,
Some
they
people,
start to
even in the
drift
days
out.
before technology and Zoom, some people may have drifted out of the meeting
Mm-hmm,
or left, and
Yeah.
it wasn't always obvious. But if it was a roll call vote, you can count them up and know if you have a quorum.
That's obvious, yes.
But if it's gonna be things like,
Or if the
does
minutes say
anyone
you
have an
have- I
think
objection to
that's
the
why-
executive minutes or something, and the answer is no,
I,
there's an answer to that, who cares?
right, but there is a, problem with the, voting, at most meetings. We now have this, wonderful shortcut, which I think is not good, because, when you start with who's against it, or who says no, and abstentions, and everybody else that is attending is for it, many times that isn't true.
That's the most expedient way to go through those, but
It
you're
should be
right.
a roll call.
Well, if we had roll call for every
As
single
long as-
vote,
We would be
still
there
get the last meeting.
2 in the morning, maybe 2:30 in the morning, we would never work.
But we used to do it.
You've been on the board longer than I have, but I don't think that we did procedural votes on things like approving the
Well,
minutes,
that we
which, by the
did.
way, under Robert's
Right,
rules, you don't even
Marty?
need.
When
we
we used
never
to
rolled
do
call
it,
for
we
the
were
minutes.
all present. And you checked off, you looked around who was there. You
Mhm,
would know by not checking them off that the person wasn't there,
right,
and that's known. Now, this is not law, this is a recommendation, but I'm suggesting that this is extremely difficult under our current circumstances.
mhm,
For example, at our last meeting, I have listed as an attendee the young lady who was on Zoom from Mount St., University of Mount St. Vincent. At some point, she disappeared.
uh-huh,
I have no idea when. My job was not to sit and watch when
No,
someone
you
turns
can't.
off. So I'm just
not-
suggesting this could be problematic.
Right, I
if
mean, look,
required.
I understand why they're doing, this. If you have 8 commissioners on a board, which is
Right.
making policy for the city or something, you do wanna know when the 7th and 8th commissioners weren't even in the room for the vote.
right,
This is really not,
it doesn't apply to us.
it just as a practical matter. It's a volunteer board, it's 40 people, we have very few votes that are binding on the city.
Now, it strikes me this one is a little too little and a little too late. Establish a fund, a municipal hybrid meeting trust fund, so that those who need financial support in getting up their telecommunication system will be able to get grant money.
Good.
Well, those who have it already have it, and those who don't have it, lots of luck.
Well, what is that purpose for?
To assist in people having the technology to make all these other things possible.
Oh,
And section 11 is there should be a competitive grant program to get this money. Lots of luck. So since we have it and don't need it, we'll never get it. Some after the fact, I mean,
it's a lot of
Well,
work.
it's probably money allocated to the entire city of New York. We count as a county, or as a,
well, till we
as
get
a
a few
subdivision or
till we get a
municipality.
few pennies. Now you've tried to pronounce his name as it's an L-Y, but it's a Y-L.
Oh, I always mispronounce his name. I always say Hollyman, but it's Hoylman.
Okay, so Esther from Senator Holman Siegel's office. And she responded in a day. This is
She was great.
because I asked specifically about this one law that we knew about last year. And that was to reduce the requirement for what do you call it, for a quorum, for a committee to meet. Now, she wrote me again today to make sure, here, 1/4 of the members and the presiding officer defines a quorum, which is different than the other one, which says only the presiding officer needs to be present. But this particular thing here. Now, I highlighted it when I read it, but she wrote me today, we'll see later, that she wanted to be very clear about this. While specifying committee boards have discretion to set a higher, I don't know about higher, or higher than 25%. So if the law passes as written, and they say community boards can function with 25%, and our bylaws say 50%, our bylaws sway. So we
Yeah, I
bring our
mean-
bylaws for our board. But this way, I first heard it last year, this sounded universal.
Is this the same, but wasn't that decided in the state?
No,
The
No, these
quarter?
bills didn't pass. We were complaining about it, saying they shouldn't, but they
Oh.
never got all the way through.
Uh-huh.
Didn't
Signed by the
pass.
governor.
Oh,
this year it has a different number, and she wrote to me, this is active. But it hasn't gone anywhere, and I say, 2 weeks, it won't go anywhere, it will have to be resubmitted again.
you have to be a lawyer to do this.
Or they hire lawyers at our expense. What is this? Read twice, okay,
We're not appointing any lawyers
no.
from the borough
that-
president,
That's the legislature.
yeah. No,
They-
I understand, I'm
appoint the
just
lawyers.
saying,
At our
Is there
expense.
be many
They're
of
hiring
them.
lawyers, yes. Except in the case of an advisory body, the advisory body may elect to require a minimum 1/4 of the members that are and the relevant presiding officer. This gets very confusing when there are this happens all the time, when there are counter proposals that conflict in concept. So this has not happened yet, and it's not happening this year. And this is what she wrote me today. Our bill does not force committee boards to change how it conducts its own quorum. It simply allows CBs to change their quorum rules internally to match what would be the new state standard. So, discussed, we're not required. And there's a Hinman which confused me with Holly Oldman. This came from Assemblyman Denwitz's office, which I received on Friday. This bill extends hybrid allowance. Was not reintroduced in either house, because I asked for follow-up. My original letter, members granted disability remote privileges to have. That's already the case, so. And that was the case before this current legislative year. Mandatory 2-hour training. No Senate sponsor for this. This is the wrong place. See, this came from Senator Rivera's office this morning. Appreciate you reaching out. Recommends this tool. I tried using a tool suggested by what's his name, by the. Come on. From Jeff's office. Anyway.
You know, Marty, in going through the bill that she said was active, that Esther from Hoyland's office said was active. I can only find that there would be no quorum requirements that everyone, I mean, not no quorum, but just by being online. You would go, I don't see anything about the 1/4 in that bill, but you know. It may be that things got lost in the
No, it is
transmission.
here.
647. Oh, that's 455.
Well, there's the
That's the
assembly,
assembly.
but 455 is this year's number. What I get? There. Senate bill,
Senate Bill S647 is supposed to be equivalent to Assembly Bill A2329, according to what she sent. And I just don't see in looking at the text, maybe I'm just reading past it, not seeing this notion of 1/4. What I'm seeing is that and she's saying that this only applies to meetings of purely advisory committees and subcommittees and does not, and she's saying it doesn't apply to the board itself.
yeah, but 647 is not his bill. 647, the Senator Scalfus bill. I apologize for mispronouncing. See right there. See it?
Yeah.
Okay, this is taking up more time than I thought. Okay, this is his bill, 455 of the assembly bill. Now I'm confused.
Yeah, you're right,
Introduced
four
by
five five
saying-
A is
Coilman's.
Coilman's bill, and 647 is Scoofus.
Except that in the case, this is from the bill, except in the case of an advisory body, the advisory body may elect to require a minimum 1/4 of the members.
Yep,
I guess the key here, the language is may elect, doesn't have to elect.
right, that's what she
Because
was.
you clarify by saying it's up to the board. Today she wrote our bill,
I see it now, I'm sorry.
I may have to, I have to edit this afterwards and clean out one of my doubles. A bill does not force the community board to change how it conducts its own quorum. Allows CBs to change. So your board can keep everything as is or decide internally, change the rules. Hinman is not introduced this year. Simon allowed members granted disability. I don't understand, we already know that.
We do that under the ADA now, that's already.
Which I thought was already in the law, so I don't know why it's being discussed now.
Well, what's in the law is questionable, but.
Mandatory, well, that came from that came from the Committee on Open Government.
Right,
And this one wants a 2-hour training. And Senator Rivera thanks me for, I see I have this doubled. That's why it's so many pages. Okay, end of this discussion. We've had a walk through Albany, hope everyone enjoyed themselves.
so what's
Again,
our, since we spent so much time on it, what do you, what we to do?
well, bottom line is, as far as I know, none of these bills have made it far enough to even
To get to the
consider being
governor's desk
signed.
this session.
So this session is over, these bills may be renumbered and come back again. The question is, last year we decided to contact Senator Rivera and said, we think this dropping to 1/4 is a mistake. And he wrote back to us, that's how I feel, and I think it's a good idea, which is his position to take. But now the clarification is, it's not a mandate. It's not a 1/4, it's we may choose. If we set aside for 1/3, which is bigger than a quarter and less than half, we could do that too. But that's where we are, so.
I mean, I think for the future, there's a couple things. I mean, if you have the patience to actually follow their instructions using that system, we could conceivably try to track it, but I'm not convinced that.
Well, I gotta wait till September, October
Right,
and beyond to see if
Yeah.
any of these pop up again.
agreed. And some of this stuff probably has a life of its own, you know, things that didn't pass one session, they sort of push them to the next.
Apparently,
Has happened this past year. And then, you know, I think if we're successful in seeing what's out there, as you said, September, October. And if it's discretionary for each board, maybe we just say. You
go
know,
with the flow.
what does Lezengemak mean? No, you don't know the Yiddish? Okay,
No, and my wife, but she's busy.
okay. But,
Are all boards going through this?
No, we're doing our
we're just.
due diligence and checking, we wanna know what's happening in Albany.
Because it would affect, it could, I mean, it's not even devoted to community. This is
Uh-huh.
applicable to public bodies.
Yeah, but the issue here is the focus on community boards, which is our interest
Right.
specifically. So what happens with larger organizations, the commissioners or whatever,
Right,
is nice to know, but we have to, I mean, again, I go back to 2 years ago, when we were so concerned for the letter to be issued to an unnamed member of the board
right.
carried on saying, we're out of compliance. And it drove the then chair crazy. Doing everything the law says, you're out of compliance. Well, that was not the case.
Uh-huh,
It is not the case.
But what I really wanted to come back to is whether it would be worth our time, once we get a sense of what the legislation looks like that's being proposed in the fall. To actually, first of all, I think you've got people here in this correspondence who prove that they will respond. And I think it's good to be able to go back to them at that time. After maybe we try to do our own self-help and see what's, using that service that they talk about, the New York State legislative, finder service. And then, we could consider just asking for a meeting of the committee with these legislators. They can zoom in and we can
Yeah.
have a conversation. They don't have to, understand they're busy, but we find a handful of them, like Jeffrey Dinowitz and Gustavo Rivera. We just explain, we can point out the fact that earlier versions of legislation gave each board the opportunity to set its own quorum requirements, and maybe that's at a minimum what we would want.
Well, come back to your question. We took the initiative on the first one to contact Senator Rivera. The question is, is there anything here that upsets us to the point we want to do some lobbying? At this point, I don't think lobbying makes any difference.
I agree.
Session's over.
I agree.
mhm.
So if some of these come back up again and we do our due
Revisit.
diligence and say, this is a good idea or not. So far, nothing there bothers me. And I understand where it's coming from between, what's it called, hands signing. I understand why that may be, that is required if some people ask for it. How we do it is another story. But basically, these laws that are trying to stiffen up the, except for practicable, they're trying to stiffen up the open meetings law, we already do.
Yeah,
So that's what not soured me, but concerned me that we're overly concerned when we're already going beyond
Some of
what's
this
being
stuff,
required.
I'm not sure to the extent practicable is, getting rid of that is such a great idea. I don't know how in practice it'll make much difference, but probably a lot of boards are not following the rules, but
well, that's just it. I mean, you're taking
We
this
tried
into
to.
consideration, but the rules that we have already are not being followed.
we do at this board, I think, but I do think that we do.
Universally, yes, or not.
That's
Possible
why we get
bylaws,
into trouble.
possible bylaws amendment. After last month's meeting, Steve contacted Rosemary, who shared, her thoughts on this matter. On that, what appears to be a conflict between the two sentences, which I'll cut to in a second. The two sentences in our bylaws about how one fills a vacancy mid-year, if the chair, whatever the concern is no longer capable of, eligible, whatever, to be the chair. One sentence says,
Well, I'm very confused as to what is happening now because, we just got a, notice that there's gonna be a budget, hearing. Before the executive board. And Julie signed it. The budget person didn't even sign it,
Well,
so.
Dave is not a
who
member of the
is-
board.
What?
Dave is not a member of the board.
I know, but she made Joy the budget. That was my whole point,
Oh, that was the one you were concerned about?
yeah,
No, now I know.
that's why I brought it up. Because that woman came onto the board. I mean, I don't know if she's your friend, but
You're on
She
tape,
came
what do you
up.
say?
the board. And she went into 4 committees. Did not attend any meeting,
I would rule this
came
out of
into
order.
mine,
I would
did
rule
the
this out of
same
order.
thing. What?
I'd rule this out of order as inappropriate for this meeting. Your concerns are, your concern as to why it was not signed by the new chair of the budget committee, as opposed to why the chair of the board signed it, is something could be looked into. But beyond that, I don't think any other comment is appropriate at this time.
Well, I just have a history with this woman
You're
and
still at it.
she left
You're still
and
at
she
it.
came back.
You're still at it.
Yeah,
I'm ruling you out of order.
okay, I am out of order.
Which, I mean, and just to be clear, the focus here is. From my perspective, as a very small committee, not on whether the recent filling of vacancies was. Perfect or not, but rather, what do we do going forward? How do we get this straight? Because the concerns are well founded. So I'm just thinking forward looking, not who, what, when happened in the last few
I
months.
would say that you can't have two committees, you can't have two positions.
Right,
So she's a treasurer, so she should not be the budget chair.
yeah, I may have lost track of exactly who was doing what, I apologize, but I'm just saying that
It
We
was
are
frowned upon
clarifying-
when it happened
We are
before.
clarifying the issue now, and let's focus on the clarification. What happened helps us to make a decision. It's not for us to focus on. What I put here, this is not, the missing sentence is missing.
that's not the right. This is Julie's commentary,
Yes,
okay.
but this,
I have gone on record with Julie and you as recently as a few days ago. Explaining, if you'll scroll down to Julie's red, that's Julie's commentary. She says if someone doesn't renew or doesn't get reappointed, that's not a termination. And I disagree. I say that the reference in the sentence, as a result of death, resignation, or termination, is a status. And the status of being terminated from the board, where you no longer are employed or a member of the board, is not about being removed, which is a separate word, and words are never used to mean the same thing in the same sentence. You have to assume a drafter, if they use two different words, they mean two different things. Removal is the borough president takes someone out, or the board votes
Mhm,
to take someone out.
right,
Termination could be the result of
anything,
but mostly not being a member of the, not reapplying or not being reappointed.
right,
So I disagree with Julie, and I've said so in writing, that she's being, I believe that she's hung up on the wrong distinction. She's trying to say that first sentence, which sets the stage, which explains what a vacancy is, she's trying to say that first sentence doesn't include the situation that we were presented with in the recent months, which is that people didn't reapply or were not reappointed. I think she's incorrect about that. And Rosemary, when I asked her if she had a reading of this that would help us out, because it seemed a
Mhm.
little cockamamie,
right,
Rosemary said, the first sentence states the general
Yeah.
rule. If there's a vacancy, for whatever reason,
mhm,
attempting, I believe the drafters were attempting to cover the waterfront
Right.
of all possible reasons there's a vacancy. That first sentence is, the vacancy will be filled by the board. Which I think if you read the rest of the paragraph, probably means by a vote, a special election.
mhm,
The second sentence says, notwithstanding the first sentence, if the board chair becomes vacant, the vice chair
the vice
takes
chair,
over.
right,
And that's the only exception, the way Rosemary reads it. And after that, go on and read the rest of the provision, and it tells you what to do.
right,
How long you wait, when you hold an election, when you have to do it again.
mhm,
And her reading is that applies to everyone else. And everyone else means the other three officers in the event of a vacancy
Right.
and any committee chair.
okay, here is
And that persuaded me,
uh-huh,
because I hadn't come up with that.
the original wording. On the occurrence of a vacancy in the position of chairperson. This. Vacancy rated will be filled by the board. Now I'm lost again.
Again, Rosemary is suggesting filled by the board is to be distinguished from the vice chair takes over for the chair,
Right.
when it's that one position, which is the notwithstanding the first sentence.
Alright,
And this is not helpful. History is not
No.
helpful, not because history is never helpful, but because it doesn't, whatever happened doesn't change what this provision means. Unless you really do an exhaustive examination of the last 30 years or something like that, but just two anecdotes are not gonna do it.
okay,
And again, I'm being very respectful of Julia. It's not about saying she did or didn't do anything right or wrong. This provision is not drafted perfectly. And I suggest three small changes to section 3 that I think would help to avoid the ambiguity. Very small changes,
and there they are.
right?
Well, what are your changes?
They're in bold.
Oh,
It used to say the position of chairperson, which led some people to think that included committee chairs.
mhm,
So by putting board in there, we're making clear it's just one of the, just that's the only position that the second sentence applies to. And again, to be clear, it's not about committees, insert the word board before vice chairperson. That sentence only applies to the job of the board chairperson. And then subsequently, at the end of the provision, I suggest using the word not just any officer, because that's confusing. I think of officers as just those 4 positions.
right,
But it should say any officer or committee chairperson elected to fill a vacancy, because that's what the provision refers to. Not, those are all the other provisions. It's just more complete. That's all. Doesn't change anything. It just makes it more clear. And Marty, there's something you didn't pick up unless you just disagreed with me and made your own decision. And that is that the sentence that I suggest should not be added down below to a different section, but rather to that paragraph, the additional sentence.
The section, sentence.
You decided that you were gonna add my sentence, the new sentence, in the event of vacancy in the position of a board chairperson cannot be held. That's a typo. Held is, it should be out of there. It's just a stray word. It's not what I drafted.
do you have a hard copy of this?
No, on my computer.
But all I'm saying, Marty, is that even though there is another section that talks about the vice chair having all the powers that the chair has if the chair is incapacitated, that is not a good place to go through the procedure of what happens when there's a vacancy and there's the different electoral things and appointments and the like. That should go as a last sentence of the vacancy section, which is section 3. That's all I'm saying. This is a bad place to put that sentence.
This has never been a problem before,
Correct.
you know,
But it-
and
but it
the
didn't-
bylaws have been written a long time ago.
Correct.
When Rosemary explains it, it makes sense. I can't do the same thing, but, I feel that the bylaws is like the Constitution. You're not going to try to guess, what the founding
Well,
fathers.
you have to guess.
Put in.
That's what the Supreme Court does. And for our board, that's what LRE does. That's our job.
Well, do they actually change the Constitution?
No, they interpret it. To change it, you have to have, 2/3 majority in Congress to amend it. But we're amending it because we found a problem. What happens with the Supreme Court
It
finds it
wasn't a problem, it became a problem.
because people don't know what it means. And as a result, things did not go according to plan this last spring.
Well, she thinks it's clear as a bell, so I don't know.
Well, again,
Well, let's,
it's our
unclear
job
it.
to
I'm not
apply
a
if we
lawyer,
can.
so,
If you don't have to be a lawyer, we're doing the best we can.
Let's unclear it, so we're satisfied, and I've confused things by thinking I put the right places, because I'm missing section 2, which really explains section 3, and they go in tandem. Section 3 says, well, this is section 2.
Well, it's not actually, it's Article 5, Section 3. I don't know why it says 2 there. I think that's because that's your outline, Marty.
No, I think I obviously screwed this up.
But I'm just explaining why you did that. It's because you were in your outline, like, ABC, 1, 2, 3. It's under Article 5, you can see Section 3. That's the provision. Now, that's Julie's, I believe, commentary.
So we're not touching section 2, which is not here. And I'm embarrassed by that.
That's the one that mentions the nominating committee, right?
No,
Section 2? No?
no. So I think before us right now is, where is it? Hold on. What's before us right now is the suggested amendment that comes from Steve.
Yeah, and those are what I call technical amendments. They don't attempt to change the meaning of the provision. They just try to help future chairs, LRE committees, and officers in giving them guidance to try to avoid getting hung up on things about this that are not as clear as they could be. That's all.
Can that be put into the procedures?
If you force people to go to 2 different places to make sense of things,
It's
you
not
will
that
screw it
deal,
up.
don't have to go very far.
Well, but you have to reprint the entire bylaws to make it clear what you were doing, because we're just adding a word here and there. You'd have a whole section of the ethical guidance manual that was regurgitating what is in the bylaws and saying, this is what they meant. I mean, it never occurred to me that it's that big a deal to amend the bylaws, as long as everyone understands that you're not trying to change the substance, but you're just trying to clarify. But that's just my opinion. I don't consider the bylaws sacrosanct.
Well, basically, my feeling is that this came about because of the interpretation that our chair made. She could have asked guidance on it. She didn't have to
And
just,
that's when I said, well,
She did.
2 sentences have a problem. One says one thing, the next sentence says the other thing. And our history has always been a vote. Within 2 community board meetings,
yes,
have to have a vote. And she read that first sentence saying the vice chair moves in. And I disagreed with
well,
her.
that was a mistake on her part.
I
It's not the bylaws' fault.
I disagreed with her. And we're in this quandary right now, what to do about it.
Well, guys, first of all, I think that as far as the bylaws go, they covered all bases, and for us to now change it, I find it almost offensive.
I don't think people who draft bylaws are perfect. I don't think God made them smarter than me. I don't think God gave them foresight to understand every circumstance that might come up. Nor did it do so for the founders of our Constitution, obviously. So there are mistakes, there are things people never thought of, and there are fixes. There are corrections, there are improvements that can be made. There are procedures that are set out for doing that. If it wasn't ever necessary, we wouldn't have procedures for amendment. Then there would be no such thing as amendment. But if there is a provision,
Well, it's very rare that they are amended.
maybe so. Maybe they should be amended every 2 years. Maybe they should be amended every 20 years. I don't know.
But-
There are other amendments to these bylaws. You
But
can
it-
see it right here. Added March 9th, 2004. I'm just reading
They
this.
are
So there
already
are other
amended.
instances, right? And that's all that's being proposed now. I joined the LRE committee. I didn't ask for this assignment. Rosemary said I had to join the committee when she was leaving the board. And I didn't ask for the assignment of having to try to figure out the best way to interpret this provision, but the board chair asked
I
Marty.
didn't mean to offend you.
No, but I'm saying we're doing a job here. And either we do the job or we don't, but we can't say, well, you just can't amend it because we're offending the people who drafted the bylaws. That's not really our job. To preserve the esteemed memory of the original drafters of these bylaws.
But it also makes no sense that somebody comes along and misinterprets them and because of that, you're changing it.
I mean, that point well taken, but if I can respond to that. Someone interpreted it, possibly it was interpreted wrong. So then LRE takes a look at it, and I took a close look at it, and what I concluded was, I think that that's the wrong interpretation, but I can see why you made that interpretation.
Right.
This is confusing.
Mhm.
And so I'm suggesting for future generations, when none of us is on the board, that we make it so that, because they may not find the minutes of this meeting and look
I
back at
understand what
this.
you're saying.
And so I think we should just try to make it so that this doesn't happen again. I'm just trying to make it so that what the founders intended, or the drafters of the bylaws intended, which seemed to, as you say, to work pretty well. Generally speaking,
For a long
I
time.
think we should make sure that it functions as properly as it can, and we should avoid ambiguity. And finally, what Marty didn't spend any time on tonight is the additional sentence that I'm suggesting, that if you scroll down, you'll see is a situation not earth-shaking. The world won't come to an end if that sentence isn't
understand.
there,
Yeah.
but it is absolutely a situation which was not covered in the bylaws. And that is just talking about the board chair, no other position, that second sentence. What happens if the vice chair of the board, which
Doesn't
that's,
matter.
or whatever reason they
Right.
can't do it. There's a lot of reasons. Don't want it or can't,
Mhm.
whichever.
Right.
What do you do? Now, is a board gonna come to an end? No, but it should tell you what to do. The bylaws should explain, what do you do in that situation? You've got a period that could be as long as 9 months. If it happened in September,
Right.
what do you do? Well, the sentence that I suggest adding says, in a situation in which the vice chair is unable or unwilling to serve, either for the remainder of the term, which could be between 2 months and 9 months, or can't even serve for the 2 months, just to get the board
Right.
running for those 2 months till the election.
Mhm.
It says that the next person in line, our constitution provides for succession in the
Right.
event of incapacity. The next person in line is the
Vice chair.
secretary, and then the next person in line is the
But
treasurer.
I don't think that is intended that way.
There is no intention, because there's no provision to cover that situation. That's my point.
Well, I would feel that you don't know what kind, first of all, if you become a vice chair of a board, I think that it makes sense that you know that you're going to have to serve at some point, because the chair is only human and sometimes they will be missing.
I agree, it's in the bylaws, it says that.
Right, and that's really so, and the secretary and the treasurer, I don't know that they would fulfill the
Well, but-
position.
But there are 40 members or 45 or whatever on the board. I mean, someone's gotta do it for the place to run, and you wanna give guidance, even if it's for a
Then don't
caretaker.
become the vice chair.
I understand that, Sylvia, but you've lived long enough to know that you cannot predict what people will do and feel at a certain point in time. And so you can't make them do it. You can't go to court and get an order that says you are
Well,
enjoined.
But just going back to some of the people that we had, as far as chairs and vice chairs, they could take over.
I'm not saying they can't, and normally they would, but all I'm saying is, and by the way, we'll survive if we don't add that sentence.
Right,
I just I'm just, and I want to,
I'm not.
I just
trying to
wanna
say
make
you
it-
shouldn't do it.
I want to make it clear. The other thing it makes clear is that if the vice chair is unwilling or unable, and by the way, unable you can't predict. God forbid someone gets a diagnosis, they need treatment, they're off the board.
Mm-hmm,
What they resigned, so they're not, we don't even have to talk about
right,
what they go into the job thinking,
Mhm.
right? Because life has other plans. Okay, so in that situation, my proposed additional sentence makes clear that if the vice chair, for any reason, is not gonna serve, that there's gotta be an election. That's not in the bylaws right now. The board would be rudderless as under these bylaws, as careful as the drafters were.
so you're suggesting that you put in that it goes down the succession?
That it goes down the succession only for the 2-month period to cover the board till the election. But if the vice chair isn't willing to serve, you have to hold an election.
Uh-huh.
I'm sure you would agree with that. If for whatever reason the vice chair
I
can't serve,
see the secretary and the treasurer being.
that's just for the 2-month
vice
period.
chair.
It's just for the 2-month. No, they don't become vice chair. They become chair of the board for the
If the chair is,
chair is
in
vacant.
capacity.
And the vice chair, for whatever reason, can't do it.
Mhm,
Won't do it, can't do it, okay? All I'm saying is, if it's for the 2-month period, just for the period till the election can be held, you first go to the secretary and then the treasurer. This is just to keep the board running, sign the slips, whatever.
And as noted, this has never happened before, but it's a backup just in case.
Just because, once we're looking into the provision, we might as well cover it. That was my attitude. I should do the best job I can.
Well, I'm, I guess I see things a little differently.
Which is?
I look at the people that we are getting on the board. And our treasurer and our secretary. And it leaves a lot to be desired, and I wouldn't want them to be chair.
But they're not being chair for more than 2 months. My proposed sentence, Marty, do you have the sentence there?
Is
Yeah,
this it?
that's it. That's it. Sylvia,
Mhm.
and that would be added on to the end of the current Article 5, Section 3 that says,
Which
a
has,
special election.
which has, add the words committee.
You guys can pass it if, I just,
No, I mean,
I'm uncomfortable with
all
it.
I'm saying, I just wanna make sure, because the way we described it, I described it maybe was not the best way. We're having an informal conversation, even though we're being recorded.
Yeah,
All I'm saying is that the succession only applies for that 2-month caretaker period, just to get to the election of a new chair. If the vice chair of the board is not able to serve for whatever reason, or doesn't, or can't, or won't, then you just have a 2-month period till you can hold an election. Under the provisions of the rest of the
mhm,
thing as drafted already.
right,
Okay, all I'm saying is, you need someone to serve in that capacity temporarily till the election. And that's the only reason for the succession. But if the vice chair isn't gonna be able to do the job for the remainder of the term, you hold an election. That's what that says.
mhm.
Serve on an interim basis until an election to fill a vacancy in the position of board chairperson is held. And right now, the bylaws do not tell us what to do. If for whatever unpredictable reason, the board vice chair cannot serve, the bylaws do not tell us what to do. They don't provide for an election of a new chair.
So let's review what we have. We have here an attempt to happen to it. Oh, come on. We have an attempt to eliminate the confusion of those two sentences by adding the words board, board versus a committee. So 2 possibilities. If there is, for whatever reason, the board chairperson can no longer serve, then the board vice chairperson assumes that position, which is what was assumed initially. And then we want to add the order of succession if, which I think belongs there rather than at the end. If the board vice chair cannot, will not, whatever, not serve, then there is that succession of the two other officers. Then follows up with the rest here being the committee. Vice Chair position. And the election to fill any vacancy based upon written notice. We're missing what happened to the sentence about. Now I'm missing the phrase which says committee chairperson filling a position by a vote.
No, there's just the,
So let's read it through and see, I think something's missing. Section 3, upon a death, resignation, termination of board membership or removal of any officer or elected committee chairperson of the committee, the vacancy shall be filled by the board. But it's not committee chair, yes, right, okay. Notwithstanding. Now, upon the death, resignation, termination of board membership, removal of any officer. But you later on, you talk about a succession for,
no, that's not in here now. That's a separate sentence that I'm suggesting.
but it's
we
this
add.
concept I'm worried about. If the chairperson cannot serve in that capacity, then it doesn't say the vice chair moves up, which is a succession thing you want to put in. Maybe it belongs here.
No, I
And
don't.
separate from
No,
committee
no, I
chairperson.
don't want the vice chair to move up. There's an election. There's only one instance where the vice chairperson moves up, and that's the second sentence. It has nothing to do with the general rule.
Shall be filled by the board, notwithstanding the provisions of this section, upon the occurrence of vacancy, position of board chair, the board vice chair shall assume position of board chairperson for the remainder of the term.
That's the exception to the general rule of the rest of the
Election
provision.
till any vacancy shall take place upon written notice not later than the second regular meeting following the creation of the vacancy. The election procedure shall be the same that's set forth. And you were right, I looked up section 2, I have it here, that talks about nominating committee and the rest. Except that no nominating committee shall be elected and all candidates shall be nominated from the floor. Any officer or committee chairperson elected to fill a vacancy shall hold the office for the remainder of the unexpired term until a successor shall have been adopted, shall be elected, and shall have qualified, which is not really necessary because when the term is up, there's a new election.
Well, not everything in, the constitutions repeat things, and this is a way of making, sure that people know what's going
Okay.
on. The reason that I'm suggesting adding committee chairperson there is to use the same word that's in the original bylaws, committee chairperson in line 2. That's just explaining why I'm using that terminology. To make it congruent with the first sentence. Yeah, I mean, the red doesn't help here because the amendment is the whole sentence.
What do you then do if the secretary or the treasurer doesn't want it?
Then you're screwed. Then the board dissolves and everyone
The
goes
board
home.
has to
And it meets
appoint,
again in
elect
June,
an acting chairperson for the remainder of the term.
probably, but your guess is as good as mine. I mean, even the federal constitution of the United States doesn't have an endless list of successors.
Oh, really?
Really? Vice president.
It isn't in the list.
Speaker.
You go
Of the
through
House.
all the secretaries or whatever, the
It's a
cabinet.
long list. The question is, for the size of your organization, how long a list do you need?
Right,
And this is 3 people
mm-hmm,
for an organization that has only 45,
right,
so. But again, the succession is just for a 2-month period.
mm-hmm,
It's only that first succession of the vice chair that's the remainder of the term.
right.
If that doesn't work, you hold an election. At least that's mine. That's what I think this should say, because I think well, I think that's the best governance. And I think that if someone had piped up at the time they were writing this, they would have come up with.
Well,
So I am suggesting moving that sentence here as opposed to at the end, because succession follows a question of the vice chair. In my mind. And then continue with the rest. That's okay with the maker of the motion.
What? I don't understand what just happened. I'm sorry.
Upon the occurrence of a vacancy in the position of board chair, the board vice chair shall assume the position of board chairperson for the remainder of the term, which I think is wordy, as otherwise provided.
That's the original language.
Yes, but I'm taking your other sentence and putting it here.
That's not my other sentence. I never wrote that sentence.
Yes, you did. We've been reading that. And put it back where it was, and you'll see where it was.
My sentence began with the words, in the event a vacancy in the position of board chairperson cannot be filled. I don't know why that's in red. That whole sentence is a suggested amendment. I have no idea why that's in red. That is not the amendment. The amendment is the whole sentence. I'm just telling you, I just said that. I didn't understand why that was, but that's what, I know you sent that out, but
So I'm gonna
and I'll
ask,
explain,
where do you want this located then?
and I've told you, I suggest to come at the end, and I'm not saying that, I do understand your logic for putting it after the second sentence. And there's no perfect place for it. But the reason that I don't think it's a good idea to put it after the second sentence is that you haven't yet let the provision tell you what the standard approach of having an election is, which doesn't come until the third and fourth sentences. That's why I suggested putting it at the end. I get what you're saying. There is a logic to putting it in the middle, but then you delay the reader from getting to the basic procedure, which is to hold an election on the at the second board meeting after the occurrence of the vacancy.
So you're saying shall have qualified period and then your sentence.
Correct.
So you're suggesting moving it here.
Correct. Right. So right now, the way you have it, the only new words are in bold. There are the three little technical things that come in the provision as it's written. You wouldn't have the quote marks that go before the N. And then this would be, and again, the underlining doesn't mean anything. Nothing should be underlined unless it's new language, but we're adopting the convention of just having new language in bold. And I just want to make sure that there shouldn't be any crossouts. And I don't think that there are. I think I've just added 5 words and not crossed anything out. 1, board chairperson, board vice chairperson, and board. There's one other, Marty, that you didn't highlight as a new word, and that is in the 4th line where it says the position of board chairperson, 5th, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the position of board chairperson for the remainder of the term. The new word is board there, so that should be in bold. I mean, I can go back and make sure that there are no crossouts that I'm not putting in here, but I think it's just those additional 1, 2, 3, 6 words up there.
Okay. I'm assuming Steve is making a motion. I will second it. I think we've conversed this to death. Is there a motion to vote?
Sure. I mean, unless anyone has anything to say, we're a small group tonight. We couldn't be any smaller.
So we're taking from what Sylvia said before. Anyone against?
He's making a joke. It'll be.
Is it unanimous?
4.
Sylvia? Yes or no?
Let the board decide. I don't know. I'm not happy with it. Not because Steve didn't do a good job.
No,
I couldn't
it's
have
not.
done it better, but
That leads to the second question then. and that's the calendar. Do we want to raise this month? Or raise it in September? We can introduce it this month. I don't know that we necessarily, I mean, you can't have a second vote of the board until September anyway,
But I think it requires,
2 votes.
it has to pass twice.
So
To amend.
next week, there's an executive committee meeting, I will raise it. And we'll decide then if we raise it for the board at the end of the month. And go through a long meeting, lengthened meeting to discuss this. Or wait for the full board in September, so in September and October, we pass it. And hopefully no one goes, what's the phrase? No one dies, resigns, or gets terminated between September and October.
I'd like to suggest, as near to my heart as this has become. I'd like to suggest, you can preview it at exec, but I wouldn't introduce the amendments at the June meeting where we're electing everybody.
No, that's, yeah,
It's a lot.
yeah, you have a lot of people on the board that haven't looked at the bylaws.
In September, we'll have new people.
Who haven't looked at the bylaws, but at least, I just think to do it.
They're gonna raise their hand no matter what you say.
Okay, well,
But I think, I really do think
I
it's
will raise
too
it.
much at the same time as you're electing the
You're
entire.
right. I agree.
I will
And-
raise it at the board meeting next week. But not raise it at the full board until September.
And just to be clear also, June is still a month when a lot of new members show up, correct? I mean, I
As,
feel like
They're
I only
supposed
just
to
got
show up.
notified of my reappointment.
I don't know if they've been already
I asked the
selected.
board office Thursday, if the borough president has shared the names of the new board members. Not as of yet.
Really?
So I don't know if they've been notified. I know that we have not been notified.
But I did get a reappointment,
Yes,
Yeah, I did
I
too.
got an
but
email.
just recently, 2
Yeah.
weeks.
Yeah, which is early.
No.
From past years, very early.
Yeah, they kind of squeezed it out.
Oh, I forgot.
Yeah.
Sometimes
They
you're
were
lucky if you get by
grabbing people
September.
off the street to join, so.
Okay, we have finished this or vote
The
of,
quality of people, not that I'm the best choice, but they really, you talk to the people and they don't know what the hell's going on.
so a vote is 2-0 to 1. On this, and I shall present that next Monday, I believe. Whatever else I screwed up here, I'll clean up on my own later. The second question is, can a board member simultaneously be chair of more than one committee? Now, in the letter I wrote last month, trying to summarize the conversation that Steve had with Rosemary and the various points, I left one thing out, which I thought of just recently. In the ethical guidance manual, of which I take 1/3 of the responsibility of writing. The issue at hand was a member of the board who submitted her name to the nominating committee to be chair of several committees. In the hope that if you didn't pick me for A, you'd pick me for B.
And the EGM says you can't do that.
And we decided and wrote it in at that time, pick. Don't play games with us. Is there a committee you want to be chair of? And not I'll be a chair of any committee as long as you pick me. So that's how that was set up. You can submit your request for nomination for only one position. Now, the issue in the EGM, wasn't the consideration of being chair of 2 committees, but I think we thought of it in that context. That you can't be 2, you're 1, and that's where you are.
But I thought you also now found a provision either in the EGM or in the bylaws that says you can't be a chair of 2 committees.
I think that is the source from the EGM. I'm not aware of any other source. but the position we want to,
You know,
remind
other
board
people found it.
members of that one position, officer or chair of the, chair of a committee, not both. Now, there are interim situations where, would you cover this committee for a month, 2 months, which is different than being a
right.
chair. And there are a number of examples of that in the past too. Did I quote something else in my letter?
No, I'm just looking, I thought someone else found the provision that talked about you can't be the chair of two standing committees at the same time, but maybe not.
What did I write in my letter?
Oh, yeah, guys. Article 6, committees in the bylaws. Section 2, second paragraph. The board may create such additional standing committees to cover additional substantive areas of responsibility as it deems necessary or advisable. No person may serve as chairperson of more than one standing committee.
Okay. And it's there.
And that has become a problem, I think, because, um, well, I'm not picking on someone that
Well,
ill.
the issue raised is can the treasurer simultaneously be chair of the budget committee?
It was deemed years ago that you can't do that. And it was Phil Friedman that was the one that they said couldn't do it. He was willing.
Okay. So I shall have to
So there's history there.
raise that in the minutes. In my report.
I mean, as of now, it doesn't say that here, this is just referring to multiple committees. It
Mhm.
doesn't do the crossover of officer and
Right.
committee chair. I personally don't feel strongly. Does the EGM provision suggest one way or the other?
I do not believe so.
No, I think it does. I mean, if, again, it's just the EGM, but the suggestion says a member of the board may seek to be considered by the nominating committee for nomination for election to only one position.
That's
And
what
that
it
would
says.
count, that would cover, I would say, I would think that that suggests, even though it's not the Constitution.
Right.
It's just the EGM that suggests that you, kind of the pick what Marty says, pick one.
Well, you want other people to get involved.
I know,
and,
I'm
you
not-
I mean,
yeah,
why have?
I know, but
just
we're
a
not the
few?
framers. I agree with you, but
Yeah.
we're putting ourselves in the position of how to best run.
Because like Mary Ellen has the aging committee, and she's also the vice of TNT. So,
Vice isn't the issue.
Vice is not the
What?
issue here. We're not talking about vice. We're talking about being an officer and a committee chair at the same time. That's the only thing we're talking about.
and Joy was the treasurer, and she was the vice chair of economic development or something.
Being vice chair is. I'm vice chair of law. I'm vice chair
Land use.
of land use.
I understand, but you're not an officer.
We're talking about two positions. Vice chair is not an identified position that is prohibited.
Right.
Yeah, but I think that the difference is that some of these people are officers. And they are also handling the standing committees.
I'm only aware of one. Is there another one?
What?
I'm only aware of one, which you brought to our attention. Is there another one?
I don't know, it's not the way things were when I started with the
That's-
board.
I'm not aware of a second.
I think that their people are making their own rules.
Well, there could be a custom and a norm that is no longer followed over time, but, which isn't necessarily the end of the world. But I don't know, you have maybe a better sense of what, you know, of these changing customs, but, I think there is a question, although, and you point that it's something that just occurred, but there's a question about whether, an officer should be, able to serve as a committee chair while being an officer. And, I mean, I think most people on a gut level would say they would be surprised if a vice chair of the board served as a committee chair, but it's not written down.
Which he is, but not of a
Excuse me?
standing, which he is, but not of a standing
Forget
committee.
of it, yeah, but we're only talking about standing committees. Special committees absolutely have.
Yes, they can,
Right, there's no prohibition, but I think that as of now, if you're gonna read our rules literally, someone can't run to be the treasurer and the chair of
right,
traffic and transportation. However, someone could, in the middle of the year, I suppose. No, I guess
I
they would
don't
have to
think-
be appointed, and that's really not something that gets done.
Well, the chair of the board could ask someone to please fill in till we have the election.
Till we have the election, absolutely, and that would not be a violation. I would say, reading what
until
we've
the
got
election.
until the 2 months till the election, yes.
And technically, the chairman, the chairpersonship you're discussing ends in
In a
2
couple of
weeks.
weeks.
So it's a temporary position.
I mean, in practice, that's true, I think is.
I mean, that will raise the issue, but I don't think it's,
Well, there might have
problematic,
been
yeah.
somebody else that would have wanted the position. That wasn't an officer.
it's a very strange committee you're talking about, though. It's a committee of all the chairpersons of all the committees, except me. And so any one of them becoming chair violates the rule you're suggesting.
Yeah, so.
Just by
does it
chance?
Make it better?
Just by chance, the membership of that committee?
Every single member of that committee is a chair of that committee.
Just by happenstance.
Well, that's a designation of the committee. The budget committee consists of. all
Oh, the budget
chairs.
committee, I'm sorry, I didn't know what we were talking about. Okay, sorry, got it. Yeah.
Budget committee consists of every chair, so if any one of them becomes chair of the committee, including an officer,
Right,
that's in violation.
right. Well, then
But
that's
it's-
not even, honestly, that's barely
it's-
worth discussing if that's the case. I forgot. I'm sorry.
It's totally atypical,
Right.
start off with. So I'd like to hold back the clock and move the agenda. Item 6, recommendation to encourage committee chairs to appoint second vice chairs. I'm not sure what my motivation was, but when I asked the board office if they had the names of the new appointees to the board, I don't know if it was legal or not, so I really didn't follow through. But I thought I might invite some of the new board members to join our committee. But that may have been tacky.
Look at sweepstakes.
Might have been tacky. So as a result, we have to do a push.
So I think, by the way, should anyone ask the answer to that question? I think the answer to number 5 is probably they cannot run for election to be they cannot be the chair of more than one standing committee. The answer to number 5.
Mhm.
They cannot be the chair of more than one standing committee. That's in the bylaws, number 1. They also, it's also true that an officer, that a person cannot seek election in an election, the annual election, to both an officer and a standing committee chair position. That's in the EGM. What is not covered as of now is that there is no prohibition of, under other circumstances such as a midterm appointment, of an officer serving as a chair of a standing committee in the event that the chair has the authority to appoint them. I'm just saying that in this committee. I'm not suggesting that we create a new sentence anywhere. But if anyone ever feels like that's a problem, an incompleteness, the place to fix it is in that provision that I just read you guys about thou shalt not be
Mhm.
the chair of two standing committees.
Right.
And or shall someone be able to serve as an officer and the chair of a standing committee? That's the place to put it if that's seen as necessary.
I think the new people have to get their feet wet first before they are put into standing committees and other things. I mean, they can join your committee.
No, that's all
or-
right. He was just trying to rev up interest in getting more members to this committee.
Moving the agenda, and we're almost finished. I didn't, until a couple of days ago, I don't know if I think I sent it out to you. I only received one thing from the Conflicts of Interest Board, which I loved every second of. And that is finally settled, Mayor de Blasio, who decided in running for mayor that he was entitled to a cadre of police officers to accompany him for his protection, whatever else in the city, and not his campaign, but the city picked up the tab for their salaries and their housing and their meals and their travel. And COIB finally caught up to him, where they finally came to a settlement. And so in restitution and fines, de Blasio has already paid 100,000 to some of the board, but now he has to pay an additional,
200 something.
Right,
oh no, his total amount is 329. He's already paid 1,000,
100,000.
so 100,000, so he has to come up with $250,000 in restitution to the city. I think he's getting off easy. Cause I'm ticked at him over the
Well, he was very,
the health issue.
very loose with his security. They took the son up to college.
Well, as someone who's still benefiting from senior care. Not too happy with him or my union,
I guess it's not something he should have done.
but then I just received in addition to that. And I don't know if I shared it with you. I guess I'm having some lapses here. Mine was deleted. Misuse. Overlapping hours between working for the New York City Housing Authority and a side hustle working for Airbnb using the computer. The city computer for that purpose, and overlapping time working for Airbnb at the same time on the clock. This person was fined $13,500. And but I love this phrase, as does Steve. And something is coming up with this phrase is not there. Misuse of city position, using it as a vehicle. Parked in his personal vehicle, which he parked in the Department of Sanitation parking space. While working. Okay, and then the damage to his car, a personal car, and he tried to charge that off to the city. It was parked in a DSNY parking spot, his personal vehicle. Personal vehicle shouldn't have been there, and he's, surprise, surprise. So he had to pay, he paid $1,700 to the body shop. And he tried to manipulate so that the city would pay for that. So he's paying a $3,500 fine. But it doesn't say now forma. Prohibited gifts. New York City Police Department Lieutenant supervised NYPD's one airplane. And despite not being selected to go to a conference, he went. And let's see, did he bring some with him?
I
At
hope
any
so.
rate, he charged the city, oh no. State lieutenants accepted CNC hotel accommodations and conference admission valued at $6,400. And he had to pay $1,500 fine for accepting the gift. I guess he couldn't give back the hotel room, he couldn't give back the meals, or whatever. And so, oh, this is the one from you?
No, you didn't include the one from me.
I did, I added it. This is the one from you. So this is a state
Oh my
one,
God,
this is a state one,
I just remembered.
this is a state one rather than the city one.
Oh, I see.
So as far as Steve's concerned, she got off too easy. She had a subordinate watch, board her dog, when she went on vacation, had employees accompany her on her private outings. And had employees pick up her lunch inside and outside the office. She's completed ethics retraining. Thank you very much.
She didn't get fired. I think that's amazing
So
that she didn't get fired.
Steve is upset, does not say the now former general
Right.
counsel.
I mean,
This is an attorney.
she's an attorney. I mean, it's. And
So I
it's,
should
and it's
get away
abusing
with
your
that.
employees. I mean, it's just no fine and she keeps her job.
I don't know.
So
Must know somebody.
let that be a warning to you. If you're gonna violate rules, violate state rules, don't violate city rules.
Right.
I sent out the spreadsheet. So far as I know, there's no unfinished business.
Marty, before you conclude, you may not have skipped it. You may have just decided it wasn't worth bringing up today, but you had made a proposal or an inquiry about having people be able to have two vice chairs of a committee for the purpose of getting
Yes.
people ready to take on more responsibility generally. And the rationale for it would be, you have some committees like land use where you have the vice chair. Him truly is gonna be term limited off at the same time or close to it. That the chair of land use is gonna be term limited off. So it's not serving a purpose of getting the next generation ready.
Yeah, well, actually, the land use is the only one that did it. And it wasn't,
Historically,
right,
right,
and it's not in the bylaws, it was just something that Chuck did and
Yeah.
nobody stopped him.
Well, Chuck is not up this year. He's up next year.
right, but still, it's just.
So he
principle.
has 2 years to go. He better find some other people, is the point.
Right, but
And over the years, there have been people who were chomping at the bit to take over
on
that
that
role.
particular committee, but we're talking about committees generally.
I've raised this, I believe, at least once at a board meeting, but I will do that again.
But the question for us is not, is it necessarily a good idea, but is there anything that's standing in the way of it? I thought,
There's nothing standing in the way of it.
no,
No, there's nothing in the bylaws or the EGM.
okay, so then it's
Even
really
though-
just a matter of have a
Do-
policy of encouraging it.
With the,
For
with
that
the,
purpose.
with the chair.
With
The chair is
no,
okay with it. then
right, with chairs generally,
It,
right,
it doesn't
Right.
hurt anybody.
okay. Okay,
That's my opinion.
Well, it's extremely important that there be a, in other words, succession situation. I have held this position for far too long. And frankly, I don't know Rosemary pushes my arm and said, you gotta take this. And I obviously,
But you've been doing a good job.
right, but
You complaining?
he's gonna be gone.
I'm not complaining, but I'm distressed that I have not prepared for succession. Which is the role of any good leader.
And your term limit is 2028, I believe.
Well, I just got reappointed, so. So I start 225, 26, 26, 27.
But you had a lot of lawyers, before you, and,
exclusively.
they all left.
Well, I had a number of lawyers on this committee.
It was very large, it was the largest committee at one point.
Wow,
Well, it was the largest committee because I believe there were a number of people who thought I would change the world. And they wanted to make sure by being on the committee, I couldn't do that. When they found out that was not the role of this chair, they suddenly disappeared very quickly. And then we had a solid membership. And apparently, by leaving the board or switching committees, we're down to a precious few. I emphasize the word precious. So finding new members and potential leadership. So I'm the first, and to this point, the only chair of the ethics committee who is not an attorney.
wow, that's wild. Well, thank you for another great year of chairmanship. You have been, I don't think there's a better word than indefatigable.
I'm
A
very.
lot of work
thankful.
goes into this committee.
Yeah. Work and words.
So I close with next meeting is September 8th. Have a great, restful and healthy summer. I'm
Thank
big
you.
on healthy.
You too. Stop, move to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn at an unbelievable
9:27.
9:27. We're usually way home by now.
Stop recording.
Stop share goes first. Stop recording. Actions breakout.
Last time it was under more. Oh, they're up there. What about there? See next to recording, there's two bars.